Thank you very much. I think that these little question and answer sessions really have a kind of confessional overtone, and that is, in confession, people learn something about each other, and if they don't learn something about each other, any encounter is a complete waste. I hope you agree with me, because I so admire people who agree with me. Now, all my life, I have flirted passionately with failure. But there is one exception, and that exception is expressed by the welcome you just give me and by you. The only great success in my life was the one when I was doing Doctor Who. All the rest of it was very, very minor and mostly fraught with the shabby compromise which is necessary in my sort of job. But the Doctor Who accident was the high spot of my whole life, and I don't suppose will ever be repeated. It's unlikely that anyone gets two jobs like that. And so that is probably the reason that they say, well, why is that shagged out old celebrity Tom Baker going to America yet again? And I suppose what happens is that really I'm coming to nod to you generous people who remind me of that one success which still endures here. Of course, it's past in Europe. But here in America, it's still alive. And so it nourishes me. And middle-aged men need to be nourished, just like young men need to be nourished, and old men need to be nourished. Everybody needs nourishment, really, of some kind or other. And the sort of nourishment that makes you feel good to be alive, on balance, then I think that's very good indeed. So let's try and find out something, shall we? Who's going to ask me something to start with? Yes, go on, man. No? Right. No one got a question? Yes? Yep. Oh, no. Sherlock Holmes is an absolute doddle. I mean, he's one of the great comic characters of the last 105 years. I mean, I can't quite myself understand the real source of his adulation, really, because he's a very strange fellow. It is true he's bright, all right. Well, there are lots of bright people at MIT. But, I mean, Sherlock Holmes is very, very bright. But, I mean, I do find there are some very suspicious aspects to his character. I mean, the fact, for example, that he doesn't like women. Well, I mean, this is politically very sensitive. The fact that he is a drug addict, well, that's his own business. He didn't push it. The fact that he's constantly rude to his friends and his threshold of boredom and that he smoked 2 pounds of black shag every day strikes me as being a bit odd. But never mind, I suppose he was comical, wasn't he? There couldn't be anyone that clever and that funny who didn't need sleep and didn't need food. I mean, he never said anything much about food, did he? He never said, do you know what, Watson? I could murder a burger right now. He never would say anything like that. He always talked really like a kind of very refined Dalek in a way, this sort of way of going. But yes, it was quite funny to do. But I mean, I mostly enjoyed it because of working with Terence Rigby, who was a friend of mine. Although the BBC, in its embarrassment, because it wasn't a huge success, apologized for my performance, which amused me no end, really. I'm quite used to apologizing for my performances. Yes. The man asking about Remington Steele, I'll really be brief about this. I happen to be going through Los Angeles. This happens to actors from time to time. And especially if one's life is utterly empty. And then you go to Los Angeles, and that really confirms one in one's sense of desolation. I mean, to be not wanted anywhere is a very painful experience, but not to be wanted in Los Angeles is really awful. And I was walking, and Remington Steele were casting something, and I was walking by, and by the caravan where they were casting it. And it really was a very embarrassing script, like lots of television scripts are, but that's all right. And they said, who have we got who will actually say these lines? Even starving actors won't say it. They'd offered it to men with children, and the children were saying, Daddy, can we have some ketchup on our oats? And they looked at it and said, we won't do it. And I was walking by, and they said, excuse me, sir. And of course I turned in, and I said, yes, I'd do it. And that's how I happened to be in Remington Steele. It was quite interesting that they never asked me back again. But then I've never worked for anybody twice. The only people who invite me back are you. Yes.
Have you ever had any cutesy kind of questions from young people who didn't realize you were an actor rather than the doctor?
Well, I don't think that anyone could mistake me for a real human being. I mean, it is obvious, isn't it? I mean, people sit next to me on airplanes, from Abu Dhabi or places like that, and they sit next to me and they ask me, you an actor? And I say, well, yes, how did you know? And they said, I don't know, it's just the way you were sitting, or the way you were drinking that glass of water. I mean, reality and, reality, especially, and naturalism is not anything that I'm interested in, really. I'm interested in laughter and extravagance and dare one say, passion. Yes, next, yes? Did I enjoy playing the Marshall? Well, I did enjoy playing the Marshall because I quite liked the two children I was working with, and also I had nothing else to do. And so therefore I have one only minute gift, which is I can pretty well enjoy anything at all, never mind this kind of ecstatic experience. But so when they said you want to be Puddle Glum, I read it and thought, well, yes, I like that kind of quasi-religious, slightly mystical literature. I like C.S. Lewis, and I knew something. I'd read a biography and found him an interesting man. And then, you see, when you accept a job, or when you accept an offer of marriage, or, some other kind of part in your life, it's not really very much to do with reason most of the time. When you accept a job, it's usually desperate necessity. And when you accept an offer of marriage, I suppose, or something like that, it's something to do with insanity, isn't it, or infatuation. So, the real reason actually doesn't play much of a part in people's lives. I think we delude ourselves that it does. That they say, that's what I know I'm doing. I think we say that because we're trying to reassure ourselves that we know what's happening in our lives and what we want and what sort of people we are and what life means to us. Because self-delusion actually is often the only way to get through it, isn't it? If you read the headlines, you think, I've really got to get into my self-delusion today because there's no other point in going to school or going to work. I think, yes.
When you were the doctor, did you always use the same TARDIS or did you have more than one?
Say that again, my dear. I didn't quite get that.
When you were the doctor, did you use more than one TARDIS or did you have more than one existence?
Oh, when I was playing the doctor, I mean, everything changed all the time because I'm capricious, and they just kept, doubling up on everything. And because it was a popular program at the time, just briefly, I had some sense of power. So people usually did what I asked them to do, which, of course, made me admire them enormously. Yes, yes.
When you were in the episode, the Blackadder episode, at what point in time was that compared to Doctor Who and everything?
Oh, the Blackadder was only 3 or 4 years ago, I think. It was just one of those one-off jobs. Someone again rang me up. They couldn't get anyone who was willing to play a legless sea captain. And quite a lot of people are rather daunted by Rowan Atkinson because he's extremely demanding and, amazing. And so I just blew in there and knocked it out. And we rehearsed for a day and a half or something. And then I just shouted my head off. And everybody laughed. So... And also, I do remember, it's a small point, but never mind. I was deeply moved by the fact that it went out 3 times and I got 3 times my salary. So I took some friends out. Yes, and bought them a feast. Yes. Rewriting of scenes for Doctor Who. Well, I wasn't officially, I don't want to give the impression because there'll be some people here who have different memories. One of the amazing things, isn't it, about life is that anything that was yesterday, no one can really remember very much about it. That's why there's a slight traffic accident in the street and 2 cars collapse and collide and no one is hurt. And the 2 windows are cracked, a real non-event. When someone comes to ask the questions about it, no one knows what it was like. One of the drivers was an Abyssinian Jew with a bone through his nose. And the other one said, no, she was a little fat lady who was blonde. Someone said, really? I thought actually when he got out, the driver, he had a white stick. So, we don't really remember very much in the past. There is a saying, isn't it, I dare say in literature and by extension in life, that maybe there's no such thing as the truth. There's just a way of looking at things. And so when an event occurs between people, and those are usually the best sort of events and the most memorable, your memory of it is not at all the same as my memory was. I met a girl in London and she said, Tom, and I spun round very guiltily. I won't tell you why I was guilty, but I'm full of these anxieties. If anyone says, Tom, like that, I'm likely to jump. And so I turned around, there's this woman, and she said, incredulously, she said, you don't remember me. And I said, like lots of middle-aged liars do, of course I do, I said, I remember. It was a play at Granada Television, wasn't it? Confidently. She said, no, it wasn't. I said, no, of course not. Not Granada, it was the BBC. BBC. A Robert Holmes play, was it? She said, no. I said, but it was a play. She said, no, it was a marriage. Now, I don't remember it like it was a marriage. But I mean, she does, you know. And yet, you know, she seems a nice woman. And she didn't find me too repulsive. But there you are. That's an example of how two people remember things differently. So when I was in Doctor Who, I sometimes think I tightened up lines. But more often than not, I tried to give someone else the lines because they were often embarrassing. Or else I tried to cut them and try and act them. You see, the little tragedy of my life, and only nice people like you care about the little tragedy of my life, the little tragedy of my life is really, my style of acting went out of fashion just as sound was coming in. So I would have been much better just before, the years before 1926, with Ben Turpin and Buster Keaton and Harry Langdon and all that crowd. I'd have liked that very much, yes. Yes?
If you could have any role that exists, what would you choose to play?
If I could have any role, oh, that is an impossible question. It's an interesting question, but it's impossible. I think I'd just like to get a sort of, I'd like to get a part that perhaps Robert Redford was up for, and know that me getting it made him terribly angry. I wouldn't really, I wouldn't care what the part was, but I'd quite like to make him angry, really, because sometimes when I see him, because, you know, he's kind of oracle at Delphi, where I come from, and I wonder, actually, if he could spell anger and alone illustrate it, you know. I wonder what would make him angry, but maybe it's out of his kind of psyche or something. Yes. Am I out of this? I'm not. I've just finished the explanation of why my voice is so ragged. I've just finished 12 weeks filming in England on a medical series about medical politics, in which I play a sort of professor of surgery called Hoyt. So I've gone from Doctor Who to Dr. Hoyt. And Hoyt, I suppose, is the equivalent, really. The kind of bland equivalent of, do you remember in the old series with, who's that ridiculously good-looking American actor? Kildare. Do you remember there was an old boy in it called Massey? Well, I'm the kind of Massey of this piece, you know. Sometimes lovable, mostly detestable, and always missing the point. I think that's the reason they gave it to me. They said, we're looking for a character who always misses the point. So someone said, well, I suppose we better give it to Tom Baker then. He'll be extremely compelling and missing the point, yes. Go on. Oh, the man says, now that's an example of my silliness. I always referred apparently to that awful tin dog as my second best friend. The inference was, of course, that there was someone more my friend. And really, the only thing that kept me going, putting up with that absurd dog, really, because of the physical limitations, was the fact that I was constantly magicked by the good company and comradeship of John Leeson, who kept me going through many a dreary morning. Yes.
Well, I wanted to say first that all of the money you can only ever saw was the Tom Baker episode, so I absolutely love you. Are you planning on doing any more Wonder Book series? I really enjoyed the Silver Chair.
Well, I don't really have plans. It's kind of you suggest, people say, have you got any plans for anything? I mean, I don't have plans. Plans presupposes, people ring me up and say, Tom, we've got an idea. I scarcely know anyone who's got an idea. And anyone I do know who's got an idea is not going to share it with me because, they're going to share it with Michael Gambon or someone like that. So, no, the whole thing is a kind of wonderful, exciting, stumbling accident that... for some reason or other, as they say, faute de mieux, they say, well, get Tom or something like that. But they very rarely will they give me. I have always thought of myself as a kind of jolly fellow who likes to make people laugh and everything like that. But instead of which, in England, they don't see me like that at all. And they give me these, inspectors in Inspector Calls or lugubrious Puddleglum. That's the way they see me. But I don't. That's an example, isn't it? I don't see it like that at all. I see myself as constantly, rather larky and. Well, that's it. Yes, that's about it. Yes. Someone over there. Yes, sir. Yes. When I played Robin Hood, that was with what's his name? Little anxious fella. Siegel. George Siegel, yeah. And he played someone in a frock, didn't he? Yeah, that's right. He played Robin Hood in a frock or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I didn't really. Now, George Siegel, as I remember, is an incredibly subtle man socially. He, at the end of a shoot of 8 weeks, everyone says how wonderful he is. And I suppose he is wonderful, but you get a bit fed up when everyone's saying, "Isn't George wonderful?" And I'd be passing strangers in the street, they'd say, "Isn't George wonderful?" And I think, well, he's okay. And then, a Sparks would come up and say, "Wow, isn't George just wonderful?" And so I thought I'd better look after this fella, George, and let's see what's so wonderful about him, you see. Because, what I found was he was so subtle that at the end of the shoot, nobody knew anything about him at all. And George's slickness of doing this is an extremely interesting piece of psychology, is that no matter what you say to George, he always says, as if he's just arrived on the planet. He's very good at that sort of acting, isn't he? Wow acting. And so someone says something quite commonplace, like saying, "Hi, George." And he goes, "Wow." And then he goes. And the person who just said, "Hi, George," thinks, "I think I produced an impression on George Siegel this morning." Yeah, what a wonderful man he is. And I think we always feel wonderful if, you say something utterly commonplace and people say, "Wow," and look amazed. But he didn't, that's the way George is too. That's all I know about him. He was very funny in the frock, but but he was, okay. That's all I remember about Robin Hood. Yes?
You really have an amazing voice and stage presence. Have you done Shakespeare?
Yes, I've done some Shakespeare. When I played Macbeth in London, I reportedly had got more laughs playing Macbeth than any other actor in the history of that gloomy play, yes. And I noticed that the children threw large marshmallows, which I didn't see them in the lights. They used to land there. And as I was doing my mood, oh yeah, I know. I think where I got it wrong was, I do have an obsession, actually. No, that's too violent a word. A preoccupation with physical movement. Now, you wouldn't think that. No one ever thinks of me as, say, being balletic. But when I was playing Macbeth, I thought that he walked in a strange way because he was driven by a sense of destiny in an enclosed space. I thought perhaps he walked sideways all the time. It's funny, isn't it? I'd seen my wife trying to stamp on a spider, and the spider, in its desperation, in this quite large bathroom, I live in a big house, the spider was going sideways. And it really was very frightened, as you can understand. My wife has got huge feet. Compared to a spider, you understand. I don't mean that her feet are abnormally large, but they are immense compared to I think it was a money spider, actually. So that's why it was panicking so much. And it was going sideways. And I thought, that's how I play Macbeth. This decision, I need hardly add, was a catastrophe, yeah. Absolute catastrophe, yeah. That wasn't the way to approach it at all. Someone here? No? Yep. Yeah, I was in Madame Tussauds, which is a kind of waxworks in London, and when you're famous, they make you into a waxworks, and when you're not famous anymore, they melt you down. I got melted down, yeah. But no. Listen, I can't tell you how indifferent I am to what goes on in Madame Tussauds, because curiously enough, I didn't think it was all that good, really, although to my horror, when I once refused to appear in some nonsense called The Five Doctors, I believe, do you know what they did, the buggers? They wheeled out the wax model from Madame Tussauds. Well, you may laugh, but the appalling thing was no one noticed a difference. In fact, rather like one of those fans of George Siegel, someone passed me in the street and said, saw The Five Doctors last night, Tom. So I shrugged. Yes. Did he really? This fellow who was asking you where I was day after day at Madame Tussauds, did he have a kind of ghastly sort of matte complexion? You're very kind. You're very kind. Yes? Well, the thing is, I think really, I'm so impressionable that if somebody asked me anything nicely enough, I mean, I really now at my age, of course, need to be wooed rather more than I used to need to be. People used to shout across, Tom, do you want to play Prospero? And I'd say, and that was it. Now I need to be nudged a little bit, So if someone glided up to me in a nice place for lunch and said, Tom, no, not like that. No, I think that was that guy. If somebody said, Tom, I've been thinking. I'd say, yes, dear. He'd say, I think we should do Doctor Who again. What do you think? And then I probably would say yes. But I mean, that's only because if he was nice, I'd say yes to anything, He might say, so there you are. Yes, I would consider anything really that's funny and passes the day. The real problem in life is what do we do to get through the days? Days are the only things we have to live in. Well, clothes as well, of course. But we have to live in days. And the big decision in life is how do we get through these bloody days, One day after another after another. How do we get through them? This is the crucial question. Some people opt for martyrdom. Some people opt for, the avoidance of all reality by becoming an actor like me. Some people want to become roller skaters, and whatever it is. So I don't really know what the answer to these things are, but there are a lot of conversations in it. Yes, someone was waving it. Yes? Say that again. Have I done the Variety Hall? The command performance. My dear girl. My dear, dear girl. What a charming girl you are. The command performance? Do you mean the royal in front of the Queen and all that? Oh, dear God, no. They wouldn't ask me to do that. Well, it's not allowed actually to say anything, mocking about that lot. But I mean, they wouldn't ask me to do that. No, that's very, very safe stuff, that. They don't ask me to do things like that. Yes, sir?
Tom, in the Armageddon factor, you talked about optimism. Yeah. Are you an optimist?
The man asked if I'm optimistic. Well,
And how much did you have to do with that whole scene with you and Mary?
Mary Tam. Well, curiously, I don't remember that very well, but I do remember always marveling that Mary Tam was never allowed to be as funny in the show as she is in real life. I mean, she's got a marvelous, fast, laconic sense of humor, and that wasn't, the writers seem to ignore that a lot. But as to the answer about whether I'm an optimist, well, Yes, I'm an optimist. I mean, sometimes I change, you know. If things are going well, I'm full of optimism, and if some things are going, if I fall into self-pity, and sometimes I'm a Buddhist, and sometimes I'm a nudist, you know, I'm really kind of buffeted about, really. But, you know, I just do the best I can. But generally speaking, I'm optimistic. On balance, I'd rather be here than in Philadelphia. No, but that's a very old, that's a joke you're too young to understand. It was a place where funny men die in Philadelphia. I was quoting W.C. Fields there. Who do you remember when on his gravestone he says, I'd rather be in Philadelphia than dead. Yes. Oh, my favorite companion, that varied as well. I mean, when I married Lala, she was my favorite companion. And when I met Elizabeth Sladen, because she was the first and was so welcoming, she was my favorite companion. So it varied all the time. I'm very capricious, really. Like anyone else, yes.
What was your favorite story and why?
The favorite story in who? I think my favorite story, Doctor Who, was getting it, really. Yeah. I mean, I was just desperately out of work, and I wrote a passionate letter to a director I knew, who that morning he received the letter, or that evening he received the letter, had taken over the head of serials at the BBC, series and serials, and he thought this was a very good idea. So, I mean, that's my favorite story, really. It's quite a long story, but I remember we were drunk for about 2 days. I was so excited to get that lovely job. Yes? Well, I think the really sad thing is they didn't ask me to be in Golden Girls, really. I'd quite like to do a scene with B. Arthur, is it? Yeah. The only reservation I have about that, but maybe it's because I'm a bit short on humor, is Golden Girls, of course, is about sex. Most things are about sex, but I get a bit tired, actually, of all these brilliant women who are so desirable and so funny and warm and clean, and I like their perfume, because in America we can smell the actors on the television. They're really the sort of girls you want to be with and spend time with. And yet they're always talking about men. This is an amazing thing. Perhaps somebody here can help me. It bothers me terribly when women talk about men too much. I mean, why? When I cast my mind, what passes for my mind over my shoulder, I mean, all the evil in the world has been done by men. All the most famous wife beaters were men. Most of the famous pillagers and rapists and dictators and most of the wife poisoners, they were men as well, yes. Yes, in fact, come to think of it, I can't think of anything really vicious and evil where men weren't right up there at the front doing it. So perhaps some of you girls can explain why, if this is so, and surely it is, surely we all agree about this, if this is so, why on earth do you see anything in us? It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? My wife adores me. I mean, she can hardly walk straight at the sight of me. Yes. Why I didn't do the 5 Doctors? It's very simple, really. He didn't woo me in the right way. You know, I was feeling rather fragile, and I thought I don't want to be with these shagged-out old doctors from the past. I never thought of them as they weren't my friends. I'd never met them, one or two. I remember thinking Patrick was vastly amusing, but I didn't want to be with them in something new. I felt then it was too close, you know. I felt proprietorial. I thought, what do they want to be in my TARDIS for? But so that's it. It was quite silly, you see.
What were the changes in your work when John Nathan Turner took over? Was it a lot different?
Well, I wasn't with John Nathan Turner more than 5 minutes, really. It was a very short relationship. But I've had lots of relationships that have lasted less than that. But 5 minutes was a good stint with a new producer, I think. I think he only saw me through one storyline, and then I was off, because then after me came... somebody must have come after me, I suppose. I don't know. Yes. Somebody did, yes. My house? Well, my house. Because I'm so old-fashioned, really, I decided when I could afford it to get out of London, because I found that London was, like most cities, diminishing people's humanity, and I thought, I've got to get out of here. And I was also going through a deeply religious phase, and I kept thinking about country churchyards and everything like that. And anyway, my wife found a school. You can see it if you want to. I did a rather incoherent video about it, which is downstairs. And so I decided I wanted to live in a Victorian school, a municipal building of some kind, because I think of myself as a kind. My acting is sort of municipal, isn't it? It's a bit baroque and four-square and unsubtle, and often is kind of a vivid pink, like this shirt. That's what and so when I see these old buildings with big windows and ghosts and things like that, I feel, and especially the graveyards around the side, I felt utterly at home. And then having gone in there, I decided then, we had cats, of course. Now we've multiplied our I'll tell you a story. This is a funny thing. You should remind me of that. Now, we're talking about strange things happening. I've got cats, galore, 17 or something, including lots of kittens. And they're all, they're mostly Burmese. And except an oriental short hair called Foxtrot Oscar, who has the most, he's got to go soon. His balls are so proud. To see him in profile makes the neighbors gasp. So he's got to go soon with his pal Solomon to be fixed. Anyway, because these cats are also upper class, and because on this hill where I live, the pheromones get into the air and are carried all down the valley, I am surrounded by rampant feral toms. And they're all lurking under the trees, looking there like that, waiting to get their claws into my gorgeous Burmese queens, you see. So because we're pretty busy at home, my wife is off filming or doing something like that, and I'm out somewhere like that. The feral cats started to get into the house through the cat flap. They're not dumb, and we feed them our cats are some on big high-protein diets to make them glossy and marvelous. Actually, I've tasted this cat food. It's dry. And one day when my wife was out, and I was looking at Solomon and thinking, wow, he looks terrific. I shouldn't have told you that. You see, when you laugh, I get indiscreet. So I ate the cat food, Then I found myself looking constantly at the cat door, which is not even that big. But anyway, the wild cats come in, you see, and to eat all this food that's out, because we're out all day. And of course, naturally they get in, and they want to mark that new territory. So they start spraying through the kitchen, and then I've got a sitting room, which is about 50 feet long, and it's an old classroom. So they come in, they start spraying everywhere, you see, and then they bugger off when they've had enough to eat. And then what happens is my cats come in and are made frantic because they think, who's been eating my porridge, this kind of thing, if you'll pardon the mixed psychology there. And so they start spraying over the overspraying of the wildcat spray. So the bloody cats were spraying all over the house. Life was getting very, very difficult. Because on this hill, and there's a north wind coming through, with the windows open all the time, it was very, very difficult to live happily, let alone to be affectionate. One could scarcely raise one's eyes. It was so painfully cold there. But the thing is that these cats, of course, are expressing love, as my wife said, when they were spraying on me. So one day we've got a new sofa. When you're married and happily married, a new sofa, can cause ecstasy. We can talk about it for months, really. We invite people to dinner and say, come and talk about our new sofa. It was Dombey, one of the cats called Dombey, got on the thing and he sprayed in Sue's ear. Yeah. Just as she told me that when he'd sprayed on my trousers, he said he loves you. He sprayed in her ear on the new sofa. And she jumped up and said, he sprayed on a new sofa. I said, I think he sprayed in your ear. She said, I think he sprayed on a new sofa. I said, he sprayed in your ear. She said, I think he sprayed on a new sofa. I said, you've gone deaf. So I ran round the other side of her and explained it. So she's actually quite good in the other ear, really. It hasn't stopped her loving the cats. Nothing would make her stop loving cats. Yes. Well, the man asked me if, because of the association with the Doctor or with fiction, do people entirely associate me with that? Yes, the answer is yes, because, I mean, how else can we, can anyone identify me? Nobody knows anything else about me unless they meet me here, and then it doesn't follow that you're necessarily believing what I'm saying. I mean, it doesn't follow that I'm believing it, but I'm enjoying it. So yes, I am entirely associated with the one great success of my life. It's always like that, isn't it? They always say about so-and-so, former wife of so-and-so, or, you know, the former Doctor Who. Yes, that's the way people think of me all the time. And so I'm used to it now, really. I'm very used to it. Yes. He says, in real life, am I more like the Doctor than, say, Rasputin? Well, really, Rasputin was only just another side of a doctor, wasn't he, really? It wasn't my fault. I didn't write the scripts. You know, I often thought that they could have gone much further and been more radical in Doctor Who, simply on the idea of a thing being bigger in the inside than it was on the outside. I thought the comical and philosophical implications of that were never, ever explored. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it, why we couldn't actually go through a door in a TARDIS and see a Hyatt hotel or O'Hare Airport. I mean, that's the logic. Where all you do is keep your gloves there, or, you know, or the rice. But they didn't see this at all. Very few people agree with my ideas about comedy, really. Well, I mean, producers or directors. Yes, someone's waving at me somewhere. No? Yes? The man is asking about the unfinished storyline of Sharda, I think, but that wasn't finished because of a strike. So I can't remember what it's about now. To be shown unfinished? Oh, no. Oh, no. They couldn't afford it, actually, to bring people back. I mean, television, my dears, you must understand, especially those of you who work in television, I needn't stress, television is the art of the shabby compromise. You know, anytime a compromise is in the air, it gravitates towards television production. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time. Go on then. I used to trip over it an awful lot, but I never felt the urge to wear scarves again because, curiously enough, if I wear a casual overcoat now, people still remember me and think, you know, I'm in costume. They look around looking for the cameras. No, I don't want to wear the scarf again, although I did enjoy the costume. I thought the costume was extremely witty, yes. It depends. Well, usually at home I drink beer, but as your beer it doesn't taste of anything, that's why you have to have it so cold. I mean, if your beer was warm, you would discover actually you are being duped. It doesn't taste of anything. It's just cold liquid and brilliantly presented. So, I mean, a gin and tonic in a long glass, yes. One more person, yes? Or two more, I don't care. Yes. At the back. Why are you so far away? Why are you being so aloof? No. Be nice to him. He might be a producer. He looks fairly improbable, so he's almost certainly a producer. Come on. I didn't quite get that question. Who played the master was Anthony Ainley, and before that, Roger. But what's your question? What do you want me to do? Was there any what? Way against him? No, I think not. I always beat him in the program. Why should they bother with, you know, I mean, it's a foregone conclusion, isn't it? I always used to beat them, and so there was no question of any conflict. Yes, sir. Just hold on a minute, will you? Could you just shut up down there, please? Yes, who was it? How much did I know about science and technology? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And I cared even less, you know. It was so funny. And I remember there were lots of, you know, I've done several of these things, and innocent young Americans. I remember one young boy who was so, you know, subtle. What's happening? I asked you to shut up, not sabotage it. They were so subtle. One boy said, I noticed the way, I've never seen an actor come through a door like you do, Mr. Baker. So I thought, this is a serious proposition. I mean, he must have been someone who could come through a door like I could come through a door. And then, of course, I looked at a video, and the reason why I used to come through the door so unconvincingly, because someone did rather cruelly say to me, you know, Tom, you couldn't come through a door sincerely. To which, of course, the answer was I never wanted to come through a door sincerely. You know, people are coming through doors sincerely all the time, and we can't remember what they look like when they're coming through doors. I wanted to come through a door interestingly. But the reason why I used to come through so, dare I say, delicately in Doctor Who was if I'd walked through naturally, the set would have fallen over. So we were constantly, you know, constantly cultivating all sorts of movements, you know, like coming through doors like that, so that the set wouldn't rock. Because when it rocked, they used to do a retake, which used to annihilate my sense of patience. And so I'd say, well, what's the point of doing a retake, you know, out in Transformagore, wherever we were, Gallifrey. I mean, the style of the architecture is when you walk through the door, the whole hi-hat shakes, you know. I mean, why shouldn't it be like that? So that used to go on all the time. And it's the same when people say, when your hand used to shake so passionately at certain scenes. And that was because the numbers were written on my hand. Because, you know, I used to sometimes say, have we the right? Because it was written on my hand, because it was impossible to tack on the side of my brain since it didn't mean anything. So, you know, the science got away from me. I always use, interesting, all those geniuses at the BBC, whenever it came, whatever called, coordinates, I believe they're called, I always said the telephone number of the BBC, yeah, 743-8000 EX2141, which was the extension of the office. And no one ever noticed at all. Do you know, it's fun. I don't think actually the people who make television actually listen to it. The other week, I was in this nonsense of television called Medics. And some fella said, the writer said, oh yeah, Hoyt comes gaily down his garden singing an aria from Don Giovanni, Leporella's aria. So I listened to the Leporella's, you know, the inventory one. I said, oh, I can't sing that. So anyway, I rang the fella up and I said, look, I've listened to the Mozart opera, aria. I can't do that, but I found another old French opera, and I learned a little bit from that. So the director said, look, as long as it's out of copyright, I don't care what it is, Tom, just get on with it, you see. So in this piece I'm in, I play a man, there's a real future here somewhere, who's terribly accomplished and rich and everything, doesn't appear to have a domestic life, but has a goat at home called Esmeralda. So I was supposed to be singing this as I came to clip the goat's feet, you know. So they said, okay, that's fine, Tom. Now, of course, I can't sing. So what I did is this kind of cod opera, which I sang in French. And I'll translate it roughly now. I don't want to embarrass you with my French. But what I was, I sang in French, who's the man... Now, listen, I won't ask you again, you know. I'll take everyone away if you're not careful. Now, shut up. So the song went like, this is where the lyric went. It said, who's the man who loves his goat? It's me and I adore her. Esmeralda, my goat, my being, my whole happiness. So I sang this in French, you know, kind of cod French. Qui est l'homme qui aime sa chèvre, c'est moi et je l'adore, that kind of crap. Do you know, so help me God. I told my wife about this. She said, you'll get sacked, you know, we need the money. So help me God, nobody noticed. So there's a direct anarchic suggestion that the man is in love with his goat. I mean, in England, you know, there are quite a lot of people who speak, you know, even my rough kind of French. No one noticed at all. Not a word. I said, how did the goat scene go? Very good, Tom. Very good, yeah. Quite like that opera. I didn't know you knew Latin, they said. So there you are. That's that one. Yes, go on. You haven't asked me something. I bet they make more sense in French. Now, apparently in Abu Dhabi, they're absolutely brilliant. I'm a huge star there. In the desert, all the Arabs are sitting around watching episodes of Doctor Who in Arabic. Yeah.
But it's hilarious watching Daleks and Cybermen singing, "Oh, no, no,
Oh, no. But I've always thought myself, that dubbed films are so much more interesting than the real ones. That is, they're less embarrassing. I've never understood anyway why you have sound on films in America, because you can't hear what the actors are saying because of the noise of the popcorn, can you really? Now, I know that this has grown up because the great generous American public are so embarrassed by what the actors are saying. The only way they can get through it is by eating popcorn and not hearing it. It's like kind of, running on the spot to avoid overhearing a conversation in a restaurant. Oh, that would look extremely eccentric, wouldn't it? So, so I quite like it actually when people talk and it's all out of sync. I think actually the best television is the worst. I love, because television now, I don't think I know anyone who really looks at television except as a kind of therapy. We stand there shouting at it, don't we? And I keep yelling at it and saying, I know him, yes, I knew him actually when he was a big star, and now look at him, he's in Remington Steele. And then to my horror, I realised I was looking at myself. So there you are, you see, there are little ironies in these things, yeah. Do I like Jelly Babies? Not now, no, but I did for a while, yeah, because it got a few jokes. Yes, ma'am. Well, no, I don't really think that, I've got no formal ability, no sense of structure. Otherwise, I'd be able to write scripts, wouldn't I? But it's a question of how you look at things, isn't it? Everyone looks at things differently, unless they get caught up in that boring way of having to look at things always the same. I'm not really interested in, a phrase or a word that just comes in the air. That's in drama I'm talking about, and perhaps most of the time in real life. I like things which are plangent, which actually could mean lots of things. Yes. I'm quite interested in that kind of ambiguity of something not being... You see, if you're a very famous surgeon, like I'm playing in this series in England, and someone is talking to you, and you look at her like that, the director will say, what are you doing, Tom? I'll say, I don't know, I'm just looking at her like that, really. He said, but it looks odd. And you say, yeah, but I am odd. I'm playing a very powerful doctor, who looks at people strangely and says, come in, take your clothes off. And they say, don't do that, Tom. The audiences don't believe it. I said, well, the audiences believe it. Television people don't believe it, because, of course, fortunately, television people only drop dead quickly. Real audiences know that doctors behave like that all the time, don't they? I've never met a doctor in my practice. They sometimes send for me if they're feeling depressed. Or if I go and describe some symptoms which I've just read in a novel somewhere to really rev them up, they say, what do you think it is, Tom? That's the way medicine is done now, isn't it? So doctors are often very, very odd. But in television, you see, they won't have it. In television, in glossy American television, they've all got to look like they're just fabulous jobs straight out of Madame Tussauds. You think, do they all go to the same hairdresser? And can the makeup girl have the patience to do them all? She must be up all night doing them. They all look interchangeable. And the dentistry is ridiculous, so that it chills my blood. But maybe that's why they don't ask me to be in those things, really. The one thing years ago I longed to be in was, I think it was called Soap. I do remember years ago thinking that was genuinely radical and wanting to be in that. Yeah. Would I like to work with Monty Python? Well, I would have done at the time. Of course, they've broken up now, and they don't like being reminded of Monty Python all the time, although they do get reminded of. But I do remember, just for your information, you mustn't pass this on, that when I worked with Rowan Atkinson and with Stephen Fry and Tony Robertson in the little Blackadder, I must say, and they're great experts, they didn't find me funny at all. They really didn't. In fact, Rowan took me aside and gave me some great advice. I ignored it, naturally, but he really he sent for me because he's very powerful and very articulate and clever and immensely rich, of course. So he thought he could tell me how to do comedy, but he didn't find me funny at all. And yet, oddly, I found him killingly funny. I mean, in the piece. Yes? Who did? Who said that? Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is about outdoor shots, the point is outdoor shots, actors like that, because, there's not much responsibility. You just run around and Mickey Mouse shots, and a few things on a landscape. That's the whole idea, is just to go outside a bit. But, I mean, the real conflict comes inside, doesn't it, in more controlled circumstances, where the drama is actually the actors are close together, and you're in controlled circumstances. So the real drama, most of it takes place there. I think it's much easier outside, buzzing around in cars and things like that. I mean, it gets you out of the studio, so I suppose that's all right. But now, the other day, to hark back to this doctor and also fiction, I was dressed in a much nicer suit than this, actually. I mean, can you imagine a nicer suit than this? But I mean, it's quite a rich company. And I had a badge on saying that I was a professor of surgery. And my hair was parted. And I was carrying a bag, a very expensive bag. And we're in a hospital. We've got part of a hospital. And so very bored. I'm easily bored. I think I'll go for a walk, actually. So I'm walking into the real hospital. And all sorts of things happened straight away, which are put down to this suit. Because surgeons in England all wear, grand suits. Everybody assumed I was a surgeon. So there were a couple of doctors, a boy and a girl, grappling in a corner. I mean, I could hear their hormones squeaking. It was incredible. Their genes were ricocheting around the bloody place like, special effects. And so I came round the corner like that. No, maybe it was like that. Maybe it was like that. Yeah. Or could have been like that. And they jumped apart. And the young man said, good afternoon. And I looked at him and strolled through, ignored him. He was convinced I was a senior head of surgery. Then I walked down a ward where people were there, longing for death. They were so bored. And the fruit had all gone sour, and the bananas had gone black. And I ate a pear and spat some out and threw the rest under the bed like that. All of which they thought, no one said, who's that man eating that pear and throwing it under the bed? They thought, it's a doctor. So I said, how are you today? And instead of him saying, well, I'm no better from the way you're asking me. Oh, he said, I can't complain, sir. Can't complain. I said, oh, good, good. You? And she said, oh, yes, I'm very well. What she was saying is, you're so awful, don't come near me. She'd rather die than have me near her. But no one found this at all odd. So much of my convincing act, yes.
When you played the doctor, you had plans of making a movie.
Yeah.
But I wonder what happened with that.
Well, like most plans, my plan to make a movie of Doctor Who came nowhere. But, although I wrote it with Ian Marter and in association with a director called James Hill. But nothing came of it, like nothing comes of most scripts. And indeed, the BBC have never actually pulled off a movie, have they? Over there, we keep hearing that Donald Sutherland is going to play the Doctor or something like that. And then it all goes away. It's interesting that they've never pulled it. I think probably, to some extent, it's been overtaken, by the great special effects movies of the past 15 years or so, and the great characters that are, what's the one, Capability Brown, is it? The Steven Spielberg thing. What? Indiana Jones, yes, sorry, yeah. Capability Brown was a gardener, yes. Never mind. Yes. I didn't keep any mementos at all because, I thought, well, it's all over, it's gone. And it's a great pity now because sometimes when I'm in bookshops, I see books in which I feature and very, very expensive. And I remember when I used to help out, I'd do anything to promote the program. People used to give me lots of these things and I used to just give them out to children. So no, I've got no memento. You're my only memento here, which is better than a few ragged books, yeah. And of course, occasionally someone asks me, would I like to see a video? Which is pretty hot making, but I look at it occasionally. Yes. Yes, sir? No. Most of my stuff, I think by now, I don't check these things, is actually on video in the shops. So that is rather preempting, not necessarily, but rather preempting the idea of it going out on television again, yes. Anyone else? Yes? Do you mean other doctors? Do you mean in Doctor Who? Well, yes, I suppose they were all right, yeah. I mean, I do remember Patrick Troughton used to make me laugh. And I always used to say, I didn't remember anyone here who was in the show with me. I remember that John, who was so elegant. There's a story I tell on this video about John Pertwee. So I shouldn't tell you that now because it'll rather spoil it. But John always reminded me of a kind of commercial for a light bulb, you know. I mean, he was so elegant, wasn't he? And so bright. You felt you could have screwed him into the ceiling and he could have illuminated the whole of Chicago. Yeah, he didn't find that funny, you know. It's interesting you find that funny. He didn't find that at all funny as an idea. But I dare say he would have done it had it been offered to him in a commercial. But as for Bill, I didn't know him. And as for the ones after, I never really got to know them either. And of course I didn't watch it much, you know. I mean, I didn't watch it when I was in it, so I wasn't about to watch it when other people were in it. I was too busy doing other things, I suppose, yes. Say that again. Say it again. I don't know that I'm very good at, that's a real journalist question. He thinks, you know, can you remember any stories? You know, the way journalists say that was your most embarrassing moment, or can you remember an interesting story on Doctor Who? Well, not one doesn't leap to mind, really. No, I mean, I just remember laughing an awful lot at rehearsals and always being contradicting, the fighting with the directors, even the ones who were very nice to me, maybe especially the ones who were very nice to me. We used to fight about, you know, what was interesting and what wasn't. I do remember there was one bit that some of you who know me anyway will have heard this before, is that the writers were always writing long speeches in corridors, you know, and you couldn't, and they say the doctor is running through a corridor with his companion and a dog or something like that, didn't matter. And he says, and then, you know, there'll be about 40 lines of dialogue in a corridor about 12 feet long. Now, you know, even a budgerigar could not have done these lines in 12 feet, and certainly couldn't have done them if they were audible. And so what we used to do, we never complained. Mary Tam will remember we used to do that, and certainly Liz Sladen. We'd come skidding into view into the corridor, and I would stop in that kind of chaplain way, you know, like that, and say, "Shh." And I'd say, "Did you hear something?" They'd say, "No." I'd say, "What were you saying?" And then they used to whisper the dialogue, and I'd say my bits and say, "Come on," and then we'd go. And that was the only way of getting the lines in. So we developed this kind of rapid technique, the actors, of knowing all the shots, you know, which is a director's nightmare. If you're directing actors who know it all, you know, and they say, "I think we'll have a camera here." I say, "No." They say, "Why not, Tom?" I say, "Well, we had it there yesterday, you know, in the last one." So the actors were always ahead, and so directors have quite a difficult time, unless the actors are very kind, and of course I wasn't, because I've never thought of directors as human beings, really. Yes. Well, the lady's remarking I was in Selling Hitler, which is the account of the Hitler non-existent Hitler diaries, which has it been shown over here? No, not yet, no. Well, that'll be good for your complexion. It'll make your flesh creep. Now, that was all about greed, and I'm very interested in greed. I'd quite like to play Volpone perhaps sometime, but the only good story I know about Selling Hitler, because I really thought I'm a big authority on greed. I mean, I think greedily. Anyway, there was this scene when someone walks into the office carrying 15 of Hitler's diaries, and I'm playing the publisher who's going to pull off this deal for the world rights of Hitler's diaries. You can imagine. That's a lot of potatoes, isn't it? And so Jonathan Pryce, you know, who's the greatest actor in the world, I think, said, he was standing there in the scene, and so they came in, you see, and so I acted, I can't remember how I did now, but I'm sure it was dreadful. But we rehearsed it a few times, And I heard Jonathan muttering rather mutinously because his line is kind of laser beam intensity, you see. So I think that's what it's called. And anyway, so when it came to the take, Jonathan was over there looking out of the window. So because he's the leading man, you can do things like that. You know, he didn't have any lines in this particular scene. It was me being greedy. So the director, Alistair Reed, said, why are you standing over there, Jonathan? He said, I'm not going to stand over there. He said, with all that bloody acting going on. But, you see, I had to explain. There's an interesting point here. Now, he's very probably right about the coarseness of my acting. But what I had to explain to him, famous and gifted as he is, that sometimes very, very gifted and accomplished people can inhibit other people. Now, from his point of view, Jonathan's fastidious point of view, my acting was extremely coarse, but I had to explain very coolly to him, listen, kid, I wasn't doing it for you. When actors start doing things for other actors in the piece, they're on very, very slippery ground indeed. You constantly, not to oblige famous actors or oblige bullying actors or actors who are pulling sex appeal, you must stick with your point of view. Now, the reason why so much, it strikes me, so much of the stuff is often bland, is because actors who are nervous people, nervous because they're insecure and don't work very often, they will oblige. So directors say, I want you to stand here, and on action, you look over there, okay? And most actors say, yes, okay, sir, yeah, right. Well, I mean, you want to know, ask a question. I mean, who talks to you like that? I was working with a wonderful actor recently called Bernard Hill, and I noticed every time, he was very funny and very likes to be weird, but every single thing the director said, he said, why? And the director said, well, I thought you'd look better here. I said, oh, that's a good reason, yes. But the assumption, you see, there's a very curious thing. It's getting much better now. Directors are more democratic and more thoughtful. But there used to be a time when what the director said, that was it. The awful assumption being, which annihilates actors, is that only the director has ideas. Now, this is an intolerable situation, as those of you who are school teachers or students will understand. The assumption that one person knows absolutely more in terms of mood and emotion and fear and anxiety than you, then you're on the way to listening and believing what the professors say. Whenever anyone tells you something very emphatically, like I'm telling you now, keep your head on one side and keep your analytical powers working so that you remain constantly yourself and you absorb what is interesting. Otherwise, you're absorbing bigotry. And another word for bigotry is unearned opinion. That's sloganizing. That's why it's so frightening. You know, when people talk in universities in Europe or in America about political correctness, anything that stifles debate is bad. Anything. Yes, sir. The man asked me, did I realize how well loved I was? The thing is how well loved the doctor was. You're very kind about that. The thing is I just inhabited a character, you know. That when I got the job, here's a little story. I was so ecstatic to get the job, you know, and I was very nice when I got it. I didn't say why or anything. I just smiled. Actually, just before that, I hadn't been doing much smiling in those days. In fact, I didn't really get smiling until I played Doctor Who, so some of the early parts is when I was rehearsing smiling. That's why sometimes my smiles looked a bit icy. It's because, you know, I hadn't really discovered smiling because I was very insecure up till then. But anyway, so they said, you've got Doctor Who, signed the contract. I was very nice. 2 days elapsed, signed the contract. Then they took me out to lunch and I was on for a year. And they said, they said, Tom, no, they didn't say it like that. They said, Tom, yes, said I. What are you going to do with it? Rolling their eyes, you know, complicity. Now Tom's really going to tell us what he's going to do with it. And I said, I don't know. And they fell around with laughter, you know. They said, Tom's such a scream. They said, no, come on, Tom, no, seriously. What are you going to do with it? I said, I don't know. And I saw their hearts sink. You know, because I didn't know what I was going to do with it. You can't, I just wanted to respond to what they threw at me, because I thought that question, what are you going to do with it, and you're playing an alien, is so boring, really, because, the assumption is actually aliens behave in a kind of way, don't they? So now when we see television aliens, they just behave like television aliens, don't they? They kind of, it's pretty bloody boring. So, how do you find out? We don't know how an alien works. We don't know any aliens except the ones who are locked up called madmen, and they are constantly exciting. That's why we're mesmerized by madness, as long as it doesn't come into our sphere. But we love looking at mad. We think, what is this universe that these people inhabit that we don't? And although you're frightened of them, you wonder, do they know something that we don't? Have they gone mad because they've been listening to me, I think? There could be all sorts of reasons. So madness is very beguiling in that way. And how you play an alien is an extremely difficult proposition, because if you suddenly come up with a radical idea about how he should walk, like that he walks backwards everywhere, the director won't let you do it, because he said it looks odd. There is a very nice idea in one of Kurt Vonnegut's novels. I can't remember which one, because I've read so many. It may be Breakfast of Champions or Mother Earth. When there is a benevolent race of people out there, and they suddenly they have wonderful insights, and so they can see the onset. They have a fantastic capacity of prognosis, so they can see an illness before it happens. Just imagine what a gift that would be. Or they can see a fire before the wires go together. It's an incredible gift, you see. And so they say, we'll go to Earth and we'll tell them about this. We'll send one chap down first. And he landed. And as he landed in this garden, suddenly he felt with his wonderful sensibilities there was going to be a fire there. So he knocked on the door, 7:15. And a big, overweight man, flung over the door and said, yes. That kind of marvelous way. Human beings, have the capacity to think and to use language and to think in the abstract, When one thinks of the line of great art, and the fellow throws open the door and he says, yes. So this little man wants to tell him, but there's always a chilling but in a story, isn't there? As in real life. People say, I love you. But, and you dread the but, don't you? We all dread the but. So this fellow, the fire was going to happen. Yes. And he wanted to tell him, but they could only communicate by tap dancing and farting. Now, you'd think actually, most of us who've been to university or whatever can cope with mime or what it is, and certainly we know about noises off. So you might think, what's he saying? As he farts away like a little one and dances. But no, this guy looked at him for about 10 seconds, then hit him with the fire irons or something. So he went back to wherever he came from, and the house blew up. And so they said, forget about it. And they went away. But that's because the alien didn't conform, you see. Somehow aliens... I remember a man in America asking me to play a Russian brigadier or something like that. And it was some film that got made about Russians taking over a particular state or a borough or something like that. They suddenly took it over and were very ruthless. And they were thinking about me for the Russian, you see. And this prat of a director or producer, he talks about the fellow, it's terribly simple. The way producers talk, he said he's very convinced, Tom. I said, yeah, okay, he's very convinced. Yeah, he said, he really, he's straight back, so I straightened up. And he said he's got a steely look, so I steely looked all over the place. I was going straight back, straighten up, steely look. He said, that's right. So I was, as he layered all these paralyzing cliches on me, I layered them onto me until at the end I was absolutely just a gibbering wreck. Listening to it. Then he said, this director, wouldn't you expect it? He said, how's your Russian accent? I said, well, which Russian accent? Well, he said, the Russian accent. I said, listen, I did Russian at university. He said, you did? Of course I didn't. Well, I didn't go to university, but I wasn't going to tell this prat that. I said, as a matter of fact, my Russian actually, is kind of Azerbaijani accent. But I said, I could do a kind of suburban Moscow if you want. He said, could you? I said, I could. Yeah, I said, in fact, I could do a South Georgian, but that's more flamboyant. He said, wow. And then he saw me rolling my eyes, out of the window like that. And then he realized he was being teased, and of course I didn't get the job. But you see, in movies, the Russians, the idea, for example, in spying or hostage taken of it, the subtlety of people, who, like in our country, in England, where the keeper of the Queen's pictures was a spy, and so on. The assumption that all Russians speak in this funny cod American accent is ridiculous. I mean, a Russian you could quite easily write a line. Someone could say, after some terrifying incident, when this Russian says, kill all the old ladies in that old home and then they'll believe us. And so they do such a dreadful thing. And then someone says, and when he said it, he had he had a sort of British accent. And it made me chilled. And you say, that's right. He was at Cambridge for 6 years, and his father was a diplomat before he went in the army. And you say, what, he went to Cambridge and he could still do that? And then you're in an area of real insecurity and terror, instead of which, when you're talking in this kind of, I don't know, funny voice and saying, kill all the old ladies. What does that mean? I mean, what does it mean? I don't understand why the people who get the orders will say, excuse me, just before I kill all the old ladies, could you tell me why you're talking in that funny voice? Then you'd be somewhere else. But, we are bogged down in cliches, and the danger, I think, that surrounds us from television and films, which is so powerful everywhere, is that they tell us how to kiss each other. They tell us how to look at each other. They tell us how to do double takes, It's got nothing to do with real life. They've got nothing to tell us most of the time. We only look at them because we're bored. If someone nice came from next door with some nice, soft, succulent turkey and a bottle of wine, you just switch it off, wouldn't you? I mean, that's the basis of most, not all, of course, not all. Right, one more question. Are you scratching your head or waving at me? Scratching. Well, that lady likes what I... Well, I've enjoyed myself, and I'll just go and have a glass of water or something, and then I'll come and shake hands and say hello and see you more clearly. It's not I can't see you very well, and I like to see people very well. All right, so I'll see you in a little while. Thank you very much indeed.